which will have to be a peace on Russian terms. And that's the objective that the Chinese also are going to work towards. Now, before I finish this video, I do want to touch on certain really very fine articles that have appeared. The first is one that has been written by Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, head of the Russia analytical section within the CIA, expert on Sino-Russian and Sino-Soviet relations, the man who provided the daily brief to the president, person who, by the way, I've come increasingly to consider a friend. I hope I'm not going too far there in saying that. As I said, we have become well acquainted with each other, and he is somebody I have a huge respect and admiration for. And McGovern has written, I think, an excellent piece in response to that letter from the various diplomats and security people that appeared in the New York Times, by the way, as a paid advertisement, which tells you something about the resistance even these senior people have to encounter in order to get their views across. Anyway, that important letter I discussed in a program recently in which these former senior officials said that the war in Ukraine has been a mitigated disaster. It has been to a great extent provoked by Western action, and that the only way out of this conflict, which avoids a debacle and massive loss of life and further destruction, is through a diplomatic process which takes Russian security concerns into account. But that letter did include that, I have to say this, ritual condemnation of the Russian decision to launch the special military operation, saying that this was, in effect, a illegal act, a criminal act, things like this. And Ray McGovern in this article says, well, I understand that. I understand why people might be saying that. But if they do think that this was an illegal and criminal act, as they say, and if they also say that the Russians had other options, we need to at least have some idea what those other options were. What were those options that the Russians had in February 2022, other than start the special military operation, which they did not follow, and which makes that operation criminal and illegal? And McGovern makes the entirely valid point that the letter doesn't tell us what those options are. Now, I have encountered this issue myself. I've had many interactions with people who said this. Some of them have been private interactions. One important one, which appeared on a program for the Duran, we didn't dwell on it there, but I noticed that Noam Chomsky, for example, also said this thing, that the Russian action was illegal and criminal, though not unprovoked. On the contrary, it had been provoked. Well, that, again, implies, or so it seems to me, that there must have been alternative options for the Russians to follow, given the provocation and given the threat to Russian security, which people like Chomsky and many others who make this argument or concede. So I just asked this question. I mean, McGovern asks it, and I join with him. If they think, if the people who say this, who accept that there was extreme provocation, think that the Russians had other options, they need to tell us more clearly what those other options were. I say that because I come back to the point I made at the start of this program. The Biden administration habitually lies. We've just seen this with this raid on Belgorod, made with American equipment, contrary to all those false promises that American weapons would not be used in attacks on Russia itself. So that, it seems to me, already narrows any diplomatic options available to the Russians before the war began. Informal agreements, promises from the US that Ukraine would not join NATO, for example. One can completely understand why from the Russians, coming from that particular source might not cut it. Anyway, I am interested to know the answer to that question, because I've asked it, as I said, in private discussions myself. I've never had an answer, and I've seen and commend Ray McGovern for